We today, my friend, are talking about shadow work. No, this is not witchcraft. No, you don't have to make a crystal grid, light incense and sage and chant kumbaya. This is gonna be super valuable, good crash course for you. Welcome to shadow work, the dark side of self-improvement and how it can change your life. What is the shadow? There is like 10 different ways I could describe this with you. I'll choose a couple to illustrate it so it really sinks in and you understand it. There's a saying, what resists persists. If I ask you, what are you hiding from? You might be like, well, I'm not hiding from anything. What about what you're embarrassed by? Wouldn't you like to know, dude, on YouTube? Addiction, smoking, drinking too much, maybe visiting an adult website. And look, this video is not to judge you. I'm not here to judge you. What you have to understand is that eats up so much of your bandwidth during the day, whether it's conscious or not. In fact, a lot of it's taking up room in your subconscious mind in the background. Like if you have 20 tabs open on your computer, they're still using the RAM. Metaphorically speaking, it's closing out your tabs so everything feels lighter and freer. You have more energy. You're more confident about yourself. Because when you're really killing it, you got your diet on lock, you're in a good vibe, you're in a good headspace. Isn't it so much easier to operate and go through life? Another way we can illustrate this. You know anything about the vibrations chart? We've talked about something like this in previous videos, where if you rank order every single emotion and kind of calibrated them at a different energy level, you would come up with something similar to this, where the bad ones that you're trying to get rid of, shame, guilt, apathy, grief, fear, and anger, you live your life there, ain't going too well, is it? But then there's some positive ones you want to feel. Peace, joy, love, reason, acceptance, courage. You're like, yeah, I want some of that. I don't want some of that. Well, notice something. Shame, guilt, grief, fear. If you feel any of those emotions on a given day, no matter how much you try to fall into peace and love, you can't actually hold two emotions at the same time. Like an on-off switch, it's gonna really confuse you emotionally. It's gonna be exhausting because you're always oscillating between I wanna feel good, but this is holding me back. And see, the problem with a lot of habit change out there, although great intentions, I'm on board, it's not getting after the root cause. You're just dealing with the habit itself, not the reason and the roots of why you're doing it. Let me give you a bit of a personal take on this. I used to drink a ton, and it wasn't until quitting I started realizing and peeling back the layers of the root cause of why I was drinking. I thought it was just to have a good time, everyone's doing it, to relax. Look at the events that have alcohol where people feel uncomfortable. Parties, dates, family gatherings. Whenever you're uncomfortable, just drink. I realized I was covering up a lot of the uncomfortable emotions, and I would use drinking to escape them. Sort of an eject hatch. Anything gets uncomfortable or I'm uncomfortable at any time, crack open some Michelob's, baby, the hard stuff, because it changes your state instantly and you don't have to think about whatever's stressing you out anymore. Things as simple as getting in a fight with my girlfriend where I'm the asshole, and instead of apologizing or feeling in the wrong, I would just start drinking because you don't have to deal with it. When I was in my 20s and super stressed about money or the future, I would just drink and, oh yeah, you know, I'll save that for tomorrow. Don't have to deal with it, doesn't exist. So that was something in my shadow. That was an uncomfortable habit that I had that I broke. Man, that opened the floodgates to a lot of personal growth. Why do I feel in a state of chronic stress where I drink and I can push through it and work even more? Why do I feel the need to prove myself in conversations or interactions to like win people over and get the validation, or I'm not good enough as I am, I need to somehow like impress everyone? Why do I feel that I can't fully love and accept myself for me and my inner core, not just my accomplishments and what I've done? These are questions I'm still working through and doing shadow work on. Exercises like the one I'll give you have helped me immensely. Now, if you want to experiment with an exercise, I found this one to be very useful. It's got 5 simple steps. Anyone can do it. All you need is a journal, pen, and some time. I should note here that there's so many types of shadow work out there, and they're all essentially paths to the same destination. Things like therapy, coaching, journaling, even psychedelics, retreats, meditation. These are all forms of shadow work, whether they call it that or not. They're leading you to the same outcome. Step number 1, think of what you want to work with. I can't tell you what it is for you, but think of anything that if wasn't there, you'd feel lighter and more free. Real good question to instantly find that answer. What am I avoiding? What's uncomfortable that I'm avoiding and I'm pushing into the shadow? One important note here, sometimes when we're talking about trauma or repression or shadow, it can conjure up images of like a refugee camp. And you're like, well, I never experienced that trauma. A combat soldier with trauma. Dude, I didn't do that. That's not me. Don't compete in the trauma Olympics. This is really important. Like, the worst thing that you have been through in your life is still your worst thing. So don't compare it to other people's worst thing and say, well, I don't got it that bad, so maybe this isn't such a big deal. If you're still thinking about it, dwelling on it, it is a big deal. It is affecting you in some way. For you, your trauma might be just like an unsupportive parent as a kid, and that's still a form of your shadow or trauma that's gonna affect you and mess you up, maybe in relationships. So don't be like, oh, because I was never, a war vet or have PTSD, I don't have trauma. That's absolutely not true. Step number 2, before we go further on this, I wanna share one quick study on this just to back it up. It was done by Dr. James Pennebaker in the 80s. He took 50 undergrad students and he put them in one of 2 camps. The first camp was a control group. He said, hey, here's a journal, write about anything you want, doesn't matter. The second group, he instructed them to write about the most traumatic event of their life. Pretty intense, I know. They did this for 4 consecutive days. Then when they looked at the data from the 2 groups 6 weeks later, what do you think happened? Control group, nothing, they probably forgot about it. The traumatic group, that year, had fewer visits to the student health center, reported better moods, and were overall in a higher vibe. Now here's the thing I wanted to share with you and what this means for us. When he analyzed the students that actually made improvements, it wasn't just the ones that let off some steam. Like, okay, I'm just gonna do this and vent and got it off my chest. The ones who got the most result from it were the ones who made sense of what they went through. There was a new level of like neural connections forming. Oh, that's why that happens. They had an insight or a breakthrough from it. He said that people who used the time to vent got little benefit, but the ones who changed the meaning and the story behind why something happened or how it happened were the ones who experienced breakthroughs. Also interesting that people who had already made sense of that story and healed it, they showed no benefit re-exposing and writing about it again. Step number 2, you're going to think of that former version of you doing that habit, that thought, that image, get it in your head, and you're going to invite it in to have a conversation with you. Visualize 2 chairs, you're sitting in one, talking to this thing. Like you're on 60 Minutes interviewing someone, and that's the former version of you struggling with that thing. The goal here with this whole exercise is not just to put yourself through a thing of 5 steps arbitrarily. It's not just to waste your time. It's not just to like do a self-reflection exercise. It's to really try and dive deep and ask why and find the meaning and change in some way the story that you're going through. Step number 3, you have what you want to work with. You have the version of you pulled up a chair metaphorically here. You're going to start a conversation with your former self. Remember, the goal here is not just a vent, it's sense making. I want you to use extreme curiosity. Start talking to it. Here's an example. Let's just say you're someone who always feels a need to prove themselves, or you're after validation from others, people, women, men, doesn't matter, and you never feel worthy. So you recognize that and you invite that part in to have a conversation. You're gonna start asking, where does this worthiness block come from? Oh, it came from a time in your 20s when you got rejected. Okay, what does rejection mean? Well, it means that you looked stupid, they didn't want you. Okay, is that true? Do people not want me? You're just gonna ask it questions, opening up this dialogue and try to see what the root of the meaning is. There's a saying that if you want to get to the root of anything, just ask why 3 times. Why, and you'll eventually get there. Another awesome question here is, if you're stuck, ask, what are you trying to teach me? There was a client we worked with in our metamorphic program, and he came in when we were going through a similar exercise here, this relationship that he could never get over. He was in his 40s, maybe 50s, early 50s, and it was still an ex from high school that he was carrying around. She was the one that got away. We really had something there. And if you know anything about psychology, a near miss is what they call that. When you almost get something and it misses by a little bit, those hang you up way more than just a flat out like, no, it's over. Slot machines know this. That's why they give you those little wins, like you do a 40-cent bet and you win 20 back and it feels like you're winning even though you lost. That's a near miss. It drives you crazy. There's no closure there. It might happen, it might not. And so as he was doing this inner work, he started to realize, that holding on to that little fantasy he had about that ex coming back into his life, or the one that got away, or maybe it'll happen in 20 years, was sabotaging all the relationships he was in. Why do my relationships never work out? He was able to trace it back to that one core story, pinpoint it, and be like, because there's a part of me that won't push the chips all in on this woman because I'm hung up in some way on that woman, even though it was decades ago. Once he was able to make sense of that and let go of that story, he was able to free himself up, release all that shake it off baggage, and it freed him up to find loving relationships in the future. Step number 4 is you're going to acknowledge it. Knowing that behind the negative actions or beliefs or stories is a positive intent. You're not arguing with it. You're not saying you're wrong, you're stupid. You're not judging it at all here. Don't judge yourself here. You're just listening and acknowledging it, giving it the space, giving it the understanding that you maybe didn't get at the time when you were going through that event, that belief, that habit. Also known as what is called an empathetic witness. Very important. If you look at kids, if they get rejected or made fun of, if someone's there to comfort them right after, the thing doesn't affect them as much. But it's when no one's there to comfort them, they're all alone, something traumatic happens, and they don't have anyone to help them reframe it, then they start to internalize that and carry it around. That's why sometimes shadow work is called inner child healing. Because if you never resolve it, that child eventually grows up to be you, watching this video right now. And that event that you never resolved is still there, and subconsciously you're carrying it around with you in some way. Before I give you the next step, I will say here that this process works really well with another person, because sometimes it's hard to solve problems with your same level of thinking that created them, or the thought loops. Not impossible, not for nothing. Again, I've gotten immense benefits from self-healing and journaling and questions just like this. Fantastic. But it is nice to supplement it with someone else there. And so methods like therapy or coaching are really good. And in our Metamorphic program, in week 3, we actually have a really in-depth process where you get paired up one-on-one with one of our practitioners who does inner shadow shifting with you. And he's able to go into the core stories, reframe them with you so they're not holding you back anymore. The results are freaking amazing. I love it. It's one of the coolest parts of the program, and that's just one little section. So that's what we do in week 3. If you want any more info on that, we're happy to chat. There's a link down below where you can apply to speak with one of our coaches for free. The last step here is to integrate it. I want you to picture yourself going back to that former version of you and giving it the resources it needed to not feel that way. If you felt lost as a kid or discouraged or rejected, I want you to picture yourself going back in time and saying it's okay. If you felt like someone wasn't there for you, I want you to picture yourself going back in time to that old version of yourself and being there for you. If you're watching yourself having a bad day or a bad habit that you know you shouldn't be doing, I want the highest version of you, your current self, to go back there to that 1.0 you and pump it up. Be your own hype person. Tell yourself some positive affirmations there. The whole integration process is a ton of work, and it's a process. It's not just something you do once and you're done forever, but neither is bathing. That's why you do it every single day. But that's the crash course on that exercise. There's so many more great exercises. In fact, if you want 5 more questions that go deeper on this, you're liking the tone of this, you want some more self-reflection, what I'll do now is I'll link up right here. These are the 5 journaling questions that will change your life. Okay, these are 5 of my favorite questions to go deeper into some more self-reflection, some more shadow work, really knock yourself out. I find that these 5 coaching questions are awesome. Click that video and I'll see you there.